Okay, this morning, Iran officially announced that it breached the purity limit set on its enriched uranium by the nuclear deal that it struck with 6 countries and the European Union back in 2015. This comes less than a week after exceeding the limit on the volume of low enriched uranium that it could possess. So I want to talk about enriched uranium and why any of this matters. Natural uranium coming out of mines typically has less than 1% of something called isotope U-235. It's a fissile isotope that's necessary for nuclear fission. The raw ore is processed to extract the U-235. So that's what you're looking for if you want nuclear energy. One of the most efficient ways to do that is using centrifuges, which spin at a high speed. They spin the raw uranium at supersonic speeds, allowing the U-235 to separate out. This separated material is called enriched uranium. This is depleted uranium. You want the enriched uranium, and its use, what you can do with this, depends on the level of enrichment. Low enriched uranium is defined as being at a purity below 5%. This is used for nuclear power, which is largely what Iran has said it wants it for. Enriching uranium between 20 and 93% allows it to be used in research reactors. And once uranium is enriched to 90% or more, it is suitable for use in nuclear weapons. Now, enriching from the 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, it required Iran to ship all of its enriched uranium out of the country, getting just raw uranium in return. Iran could then process that ore, but it was limited to 660 pounds or less of low enriched, under 5% enriched uranium. The top enrichment level the country was allowed was actually set at 3.67% purity. So at that purity, you can't do anything except generate energy. The International Atomic Energy Agency said inspectors would check if Iran had indeed exceeded this enrichment. Now, the reason those limits are important is that it takes about 550 pounds or 250 kilos of 20% enriched uranium to create 55 pounds of weapons-grade uranium. As a way to further limit the processing, the nuclear deal restricted Iran to just 5,060 centrifuges. They had more than 20,000 at the time to enrich its raw uranium. Now Iran is warning that it's going to enrich to 20% if sanctions are not relieved in the next 60 days. I know that's a lot of numbers, but it's relevant because you're going to be seeing headlines about what Iran is doing, and you need to know why. Joining me now is physicist and president of the Institute for Science and International Security, David Albright. He's been studying Iran's nuclear program for more than 2 decades and advised the limits in the Iran nuclear deal. I don't know if I completely botched that, David, but I'm trying to explain to people why these numbers are relevant at different points.
No, you did quite well, and it's a very complicated subject, and I congratulate you for an excellent job. I mean, the bottom line is that these limits were a way to try to keep Iran far away from being able to have enough weapon-grade uranium, this, what you mentioned, over 90% enriched in U-235, from having enough of that to make a nuclear weapon. And so it would take them a full year or so to get there. I mean, we could argue it may be as little as 7 months, but 7 months is still a long time. And so the deal ratcheted back Iran's nuclear program considerably and greatly increased the breakout timeline, which was the principal goal of the deal.
All right, let's talk about, when you're talking about, Iran says it's going to get to 20% or wants to get to 20%. Does that necessarily mean that they're heading toward a nuclear weapon, or is that just what we're supposed to infer so as for people to say, hey, let's take Iran seriously?
It's hard to know what they're up to right now. I mean, Iran has had many minor violations of the deal. In the past, they've walked them back. This time, we're not sure they're going to walk them back, but they still are relatively minor violations of the limits. They didn't go very far over the limit on volume of enriched uranium. They haven't gone very high above the enriched level of 3.67%. So, I mean, we don't know where this is headed. I mean, the difference now is that they are implying that they are potentially walking away from this deal, which they have a right to do. What Iran is risking, though, is that the parties to the deal can snap back the sanctions. Iran is actually risking making its situation much worse
then why
economically.
Would they do this?
It's already suffering enormously. I'm sorry?
Then why would they do this?
Why would Iran do this? I think most people are commenting that Iran thinks it can increase pressure on Europe to step in to limit U.S. sanctions. It can try to create a better negotiating platform if it is going to sit down with the United States. So, I mean, Iran has reasons to do this, but I think it's unfortunately, if Iran isn't willing to negotiate with the United States, it's probably headed toward a snapback of sanctions by the EU if it continues down this path. So it doesn't mean there's going to be military action. I personally don't think this is really about military action at all. I don't think Iran's risking it, but it is risking much greater sanctions if it continues down this path.
How far in Iran? How much capability does Iran have to get to a nuclear weapon, or get to, you know? Can they do it with the stuff that they've got?
Yes, and unfortunately, another chilling, I would say a chilling fact that's emerged recently followed from Israel's seizure of a portion of a nuclear weapons archive in Tehran. They seized it in early 2018, and I and others at my institute studied a significant portion of those documents over the last year. And Iran had a much more advanced nuclear weapons program that was known at the time the JCPOA was negotiated. It can reconstitute that effort. It's maintaining that archives. I mean, the United States could argue quite legitimately that Iran's been violating the JCPOA because of this archives. It chose not to do that. But it means that Iran can build nuclear weapons if it wants to. It knows how to enrich uranium. And so if Iran does decide to build nuclear weapons, it'll be quite a credible program.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.